let's produce food, let's put men and women up and running and make sure that we take care of the elderly, of the hospitals, of low-income families, homeless, one plate of food at a time.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Jordan. I'm the national correspondent for the Washington Post, and what a delight today to welcome our guests. We have José Andrés, well-known chef, and of course the founder of the world's central kitchen. And we also have Senator Chris Coons from Delaware. The topic couldn't be more important: hunger in America and how we can ease this problem that's growing amid growing unemployment. Let's go to Chef Andrés. You're out there on the streets, and like, how bad is the hunger problem? What are you seeing?
So thank you for having me, but very quickly I want to be saying thank you, and especially thanks to Senator Coons for the amazing speech he gave there in the middle of the crowd about the important thing we're talking right now about Black Lives Matters, about why racism has no space. So in our country, in our planet. So thank you, Senator Coons, for your leadership. So Mary, let's go very quickly to what I'm seeing. I've been in many states. Obviously, we are on emergency mode since the beginning of this pandemic when World Central Kitchen went to Yokohama. And since then, we've been feeding people all over, especially in America, where we are doing, at one moment, 350,000 meals a day. And what I'm seeing is that hunger is invisible, that hunger, you don't see it, that this emergency is real, even there is not destruction. We have many families that still they're waiting for their unemployment checks. We have many people that for many reasons they are not able to apply for federal aid. Those families are having hard time putting food on their tables. So in the many places that we see that the pandemic has hit the hardest is also at the same time the places where we see hunger. So the problem is real, the problem is big, and we can do something about it. If we take action right now, we can make sure that food is the solution instead of food becoming the problem.
So let's talk about that. You're talking about legislation that's needed called the FEED Act. Can you tell us about how that would work and alleviate? We have millions of people going to bed hungry. How does it help?
Well, I want to say that when you see cooks like José Andrés and cooks like Tom Colicchio, like we are able to agree in a very crazy way to be talking about bills, it's because senators like Senator Coons and many others, they've been giving us an amazing opportunity over the years to learn how the system works. So in a moment like this, we can be part of the solution. So what World Central Kitchen began doing was putting restaurants to work in this pandemic. Why? All the restaurants are out of job. And if you have hungry people, who are the best people to feed the hungry? Cooks, chefs, restaurants. You don't have to reinvent the system. Obviously, to feed everybody, it requires not one solution, but multiple solutions. We need to be funding the food banks appropriately. We need to make sure they have enough volunteers or people they can hire. We need to make sure that the SNAPs, what we know as food stamps, that is well funded and that we can even increase its reach by using them in restaurants or being able to order online or be able to order on farmers markets. We need the school lunch programs to be kept and maintained, and even introducing extra money so you don't only feed the children, but you also feed the families. But what we began doing at World Central Kitchen was simple. We put almost 2,000 restaurants to work all across America. Restaurants doing anywhere from 100 to 2,000 meals each, where locally, the mayors, the different NGOs, we can connect the need with the restaurants, and all of a sudden we solve many problems. We are able to put people to work. We are able to feed the hungry. In the process, we put the system up and running. The restaurants can be buying from the farmers. All of a sudden, you don't have waste. It's a brilliant 360-degree idea. The FEED Act, brilliant. We are bringing Republicans and Democrats together. Congress already passed. It's on the Senate. We know we have people like Senator Coons and then Senator Harris, Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina, Republicans again and Democrats working together. This is breaking bread at its worst moment. is the best politics that happens is good policy.
So, Senator, it's in your ball court right now. You know, we have idle restaurants, idle chefs, unemployed people, and we have hungry people. So what is it I mean, are you optimistic that this legislation is going to pass, and when?
Well, Mary, frankly, as I've traveled up and down my home state of Delaware and seen the food bank of Delaware providing food, badly needed food to newly hungry Delawareans in food box distributions, helped by volunteers, helped by our National Guard, I'm clear about how urgent this need is. I am so grateful to José Andrés and World Central Kitchen for everything that they are doing to bring forward innovative solutions to addressing hunger in the United States. I am concerned that right now there isn't a sense of urgency, Mary, on how to move this bill forward in the Senate. Senator Scott and Senator Harris have a wide number of senators interested in supporting and moving this bill, but the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, Republican senator of Kentucky, is showing no urgency about taking up and passing another bill to respond to the pandemic. As Jose just said, hunger is invisible, but we know it is infecting millions. It is impacting and affecting millions of American households, from rural communities to urban communities. We also know that we have farmers who grow for restaurants who have surplus crops they're going under or having to throw away. We have restaurant workers who are only now beginning to get back to work in some places. In Delaware, Little Delaware, we have 2,000 restaurants. The vast majority of them are closed, and maybe a third of them will not open again. We can come together to address hunger. The FEED Act is a great way to do that. Another way I am hoping we will do that is by expanding national service, the so-called AmeriCorps program, to give opportunities for Americans currently out of work to get engaged in national service and working in their communities, to support food banks, to support programs like Meals on Wheels, to support this connection between farmers, local restaurants, and hungry families that Jose is drawing our attention to today.
I think ordinary people are trying to figure out, well, if Congress can bail out different and so what is how can you not is a priority?
I can't hear her.
I've not been able to listen to the question.
Oh, we can hear it.
Jose, can you mute while she asks the question?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Senator Coons, I just think that ordinary people have seen that Congress has taken action. They have bailed out airlines, they have given big breaks to companies. But when we're talking about hungry kids, what is the holdup and what's the timetable? I mean, I know you said that there's some people who are hesitant because it's invisible, but where's the leadership and when is this going to happen?
Mary, that's a great question. I can't understand how the majority leader looks at the situation in our country and thinks that there is not an urgency about moving forward. We did come together and unanimously pass the CARES Act 2 months ago, which provided $375 billion worth of assistance through the Small Business Administration to small businesses across our country, many of them restaurants. We did just come together in a bipartisan way last week to amend and expand that Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, for restaurants. I think there is a crisis in terms of hunger. Many other senators do as well. But frankly, this is a decision by the majority leader of the Senate to not take a bill up and to not give it floor time. We are right now working on a conservation bill, which, while important, a positive step forward, it is not more important than millions of hungry Americans. This should get floor time. Getting the FEED Act passed should be a priority for the Senate. And I'm frustrated and upset that Republican leaders in the majority are not giving it the priority and the floor time that it needs and that hungry Americans deserve.
There's more unemployment now than at any time since the Great Depression. And in times like this, in crisis, we have mobilized citizens. Talk a little bit about your AmeriCorps expansion. There's an enormous amount of people, young people with no jobs. And how would you use them when you expand AmeriCorps? Exactly how would they be employed to kind of help other Americans?
Well, thank you for the question, Mary. Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi and I will be introducing a bill with a wide range of Democratic and Republican co-sponsors in the Senate. Today, there's about 75,000 Americans serving through a national service program known as AmeriCorps, and many more serving through Senior Corps. Our bill would double the number of AmeriCorps program slots to 150,000 for the rest of this year, and then increase it to 200,000 and 250,000 for the next 2 years after. And it would increase how much they get paid, their living stipend, and how much they earn for college as a result. It's a roughly $15 billion bill over 3 years, a robust expansion that would allow mayors and governors, nonprofit leaders, and community leaders all over the country to decide in locally driven and locally initiated programs to partner with initiatives like the FEED Act, like food banks, like Meals on Wheels. There are already existing AmeriCorps programs around the country that do things to address hunger. I had a chance to talk to James Winfield, for example, in Baltimore just a few weeks ago from Civic Works, a program that has hundreds of AmeriCorps members that is connecting senior citizens who are shut in at home and hungry, and typically the beneficiary of programs like Meals on Wheels, with a program that Civic Works already had underway to address food deserts, to help create community gardens, and to connect low-income minority communities in Baltimore with farmers who are committed to bringing in healthy produce. So that's one very local example of an AmeriCorps program that hires locally, that hires exactly the people from the community most impacted by hunger and by the pandemic. That is an example of the type of thing that might well be expanded through this AmeriCorps expansion. There's many other examples across the country. AmeriCorps, Mary, is a decades-old nationwide program that enjoys support from both Republicans and Democrats, mayors, governors, and senators.
Let me go back to Chef Andres for a minute. You've had some fairly famous run-ins with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and interestingly, over a restaurant. There was a restaurant that you were going to open and decided not to in his hotel. Here we are talking about restaurants who are shuttered across America. You know, many people think half of them may not reopen, and people are hungry. How do you think President Trump has done to help restaurants and to help the hungry?
Yes, my issue this was something of the past, and we found a solution. I was not very happy the way immigrants were portrayed. After all, I am an immigrant myself. Whatever I've done in my life is in part because I had some great immigrants next to me. And so anyway, that's something of the past. But talking about how this administration, listen, we need to be pragmatic. This administration was very quick in trying to pass in getting the PPP working. That was a good idea. That then, as when you put ideas very quick and very fast, and without seeing really how this pandemic was going to be affecting small businesses across America, at the end we learned that was not going to be so effective. But then we saw over the next weeks, with a lot of support, I was very involved with Tom Colicchio and others through the Independent Restaurant Coalition to be lobbying the White House for changes. And at the end, many of these changes happened on the a week ago on the last bill. So that was improved. So overall on that end, while it was not perfect, I think they did okay. But we need to remember that if we talk restaurants, only 10% of restaurants and small business were able to have access to those funds. And I do believe that the White House and Congress, they are going to have to be passing another bill specifically to be giving support to restaurants. Remember that we are one of the biggest industries on the country. That is not only the direct jobs that the restaurant create, but also the indirect jobs that the restaurant industry create. More than 90 cents of every dollar trickles down all across the local economy. So it's going to be vital that the White House don't think like everything is finished, that they are only thinking about reopening. This is okay to think about reopening, but to do that, you're going to have to make sure that they are supporting the small business of America, specifically restaurants, because America restaurants is part of the DNA. So we need to do more and we need to do better. So far, okay, but I will not say that they done a great job. We need to finish the job. This is going to be 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years until things maybe go back to normal. And we're going to be needing smart ideas coming from White House, coming from Congress to keep the economy moving.
You have been in many, many different disaster zones. I think that many Americans are kind of in bubbles right now. In fact, they're supposed to be staying at home. But can you give us a sense right now, given how many people are employed by restaurants, how many restaurants are probably going to go bankrupt, how many people are unemployed, and how many people are hungry? How do you describe this? You've been in this country a long time. Have you ever seen kind of a situation, an economic situation like we're in now, and a hunger situation like we're in now?
Obviously, this is an emergency that maybe is one of the reasons, as Senator Coons was mentioning, that everybody began talking about the pandemic and the health crisis. Health crisis that I don't think we can give ourselves a 10 in the way we've handled it in the United States and around the world. In some cases, we've been slow, even when the health experts, they've been telling us exactly what the governments and the people had to do. And we've been very slow. Then we had the economic crisis that everybody began talking about. At one moment, the White House was talking more about the economic crisis than about the health crisis. And then we have the food humanitarian crisis. I do believe, as Senator Coons says, that we are not recognizing that crisis. And until you don't verbally recognize that crisis, nothing is going to happen. So I do believe it's going to be vital that congressmen, senators of both parties go out. The leader of the Senate, they should be going out in his own community, and he's going to see how we have hunger because this pandemic, because people are being unemployed, because the restaurants are closed, because the governors, the mayors, the government is telling us you must shut down.
Can I ask you a very
reasons.
short question? I just wanted to ask you a really quick thing, and then I'm going to go to Senator Coons with the viewer's question. But José Andrés, you were just saying that we're not recognizing this. We see long lines at food banks. Why are we not recognizing how big this crisis is?
Listen, I know that the White House and the USDA, I went almost 100 days ago to the USDA to speak to Undersecretary of Agriculture. And I saw that, yes, they had few things going on, but the USDA, they are not known for emergency, but they were able to put these kind of boxes that they call farm to families. That is a great idea that in some parts is working, but then in other parts, like for example, in Austin, they gave the contract to a company that never did food before. Therefore, that company with millions of dollars at their disposal, they're leaving a lot of people in Texas hungry because they are not executing. I don't hear the urgency of now from the White House. And I will say, without making it, there's a lot of Republicans like Senator Coons that they support and they recognize the emergency. But I need to hear the President of the United States recognizing that actually, with all the unemployment going on, when we already had 38 million Americans that they were food insecure, that number has almost doubled. They need to recognize that those lines are real. And if I was the President of the United States, I will never want to have lines, the most powerful country in the history of mankind, We can do something about it. The White House can do something about it. President Trump should recognize that we have a food issue, and it's very simple. Let's invest money into the solution. This can happen. The FEED Act is a great idea. Also, this bill that Senator Coons is moving forward to bring young people into a volunteer new Peace Corps is a brilliant idea. We need brilliant ideas like this. This, again, is a smart policy that should be a smart politics. Everybody is supposed to be behind this. I hope President Trump listens to us right now, and he will be supporting initiatives like the FEED Act and like what Senator Coons is trying to move forward.
The urgency of now. So let's go to Senator Coons, and we have a viewer question here from Alicia Smith in Washington. And she's saying both to Chef Andres, many Americans are experiencing food insecurity for the first time. And at the same time, there's so much food waste. What can the average American do to help out? She asked this to Chef Andres, and he can answer too, but let me go to Senator Coons for a second, and then we'll go back to you. What can average people do, Senator?
First, Mary, if I could, in this moment, when millions of Americans are marching for racial justice, we shouldn't lose the perspective that of the nearly 38 million Americans who were hungry, who were food insecure before the pandemic, before the recession, back in a time of full employment, of a roaring economy, we still had nearly 38 million Americans hungry, and that's overwhelmingly impacting communities of color. Black and brown Americans were experiencing hunger and food insecurity at a much higher rate than white Americans before the pandemic. Now the pandemic hits and many, many millions have had to file unemployment, more than 40 million Americans. And as Chef Andres just said, the number of food insecure Americans has more than doubled. So first, we should keep the perspective that this amplifies, that it impacts the ways in which racial injustice has consequences for communities of color. Make sure that is part of your advocacy to members of Congress, to state and local governments, to keep food insecurity and its impacts on racial minorities in our country at the forefront of your mind. Second, there's ways you can change how you purchase food, how you consume food, and how you support restaurants and nonprofits that reduces food waste and that creates incentives for it to be redirected to food banks that can help serve and feed and support hungry people.
Well, let's stay on racial injustice, because right now, today, was the funeral of George Floyd. There's a raging debate around the country about racial injustice, what can be done. And one of the things is the defund the police debate. And I'd like to hear from you, Senator Coons, about what that means to you, and do you support it? Just a couple hours ago, the president tweeted, defunding police would be good for robbers and rapists. So when you hear defund the police, Senator Coons, what does it mean to you, and are you behind it?
Well, Mary, I was at a protest rally this weekend in Middletown, Delaware, and in talking to some of the activists who had a defund the police sign, I heard two different things. Some felt strongly that we have unaddressed community priorities, drug treatment, responding to the opioid epidemic, mental health concerns, behavioral health concerns. And they were saying that for too long, we've been asking the police departments of America and the jails and prisons of America to be the places where we address and take care of, as a matter of last resort, homelessness and mental health and addiction. And they were asking for a higher priority on funding those issues. I support that. I agree with that. I don't think we're going to move forward as a nation towards being more just if we don't increase our investment in areas that haven't had enough investment. But I don't support a different summary that I heard from another activist, which was they literally wanted us to close police departments. I don't think that's wise or appropriate. We do have a need for policing, for modernized and progressive and accountable policing, yes. But the idea of shutting down police departments, I don't think makes any sense. And many other leaders in my caucus, in my home state, in my community, have made this distinction as well. We should increase our investment where there is increased need, and a renewed focus on racial justice should make us prioritize new investment in areas of our community that continue to struggle with the consequences of racial injustice.
And for quite a lot of people, defunding the police just means prioritizing other things. For small communities where they're spending 40% of their entire budget on police and equipment for the police, they're begging for more support for mental health and food and education. So it is a definitional problem in some ways. But what do you think, very quickly, and then I'm going to go back to Chef Andres to ask him what ordinary people can do. But what did you, just very briefly, Senator, what do you think about that tweet? Defunding police would be good for robbers and rapists. That
Look,
President Trump.
Mary, we're in a moment where we need a president, we need a national leader who can help us heal, who can help us hear each other, and can help move forward positive solutions. At a moment when all of us should be taking the time to reflect on the funeral that's happening today, I would wish that President Trump would stop with constant tweets that are designed to further divide us and to inflame some of our differences, and instead put forward positive proposals. I happen to be supporting Joe Biden, my predecessor in the Senate, who I think has done just that. In his recent remarks, in his actions, he went to Houston to visit with the family of George Floyd, and he's made what I think are positive and purposeful statements about how to bring America together.
So we're running out of time, but I'm going to give you the last word, Chef Andres. Ordinary people, we have lots of viewers listening in. They care about hungry people. What can they do? And we have to do it quickly.
Well,
We're running out
what
of
they
time.
should be doing is you supporting good initiatives and good policy. The other day, I was very lucky to have with Vice President Biden a town hall about food issues. I think it's the first time in the history we have a presidential candidate giving time to talk about how food should be treated almost as national security. We need to make sure that food is the solution, not the problem. We need the smart people on the private sector. We need the smart people in the government to come up with ideas like you mentioned before. Why we have food waste? Let's make sure that we start funding the next Amazon of food waste to make sure that no food will ever be wasted. So in the process, we make sure that also we will never ever again waste the life of a human being. It's an amazing possibility out there. Let's just invest what is right, and you will see how food will and can be the solution of many of the problems our communities are facing.
I'm grateful to you both. Thank you very, very much. Chef Andres, Senator Coons, we appreciate the discussion, an important one about hunger in America. I ask the viewers to stay on listening because in just a minute, we're going to have very well. Thank you with us. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a minute.
We're not going to buy back our stocks with this. We're not going to give, our executives bonuses. That money's going out the door into the economies.
Wow. We're so delighted to welcome Tom Colicchio here today. Not only a well-known chef, owner of restaurants, but a TV star too, from the Bravo hit Top Chef. Everybody knows what's going on in the crisis with restaurants. We see it in every corner in every state in America. They're shuttered. And Tom, what is going to happen? What is your outlook about restaurants? How many are going to survive, and when are they going to come back up?
Yeah, this is a tough position that we're in right now. Thanks for having me on, Mary. The James Beard Foundation did a survey, and only 20% of the respondents said that they would definitely reopen the restaurants. We're hearing stories every day of restaurants and restaurants that have been around a long time that are closing their doors for good and shuttering. this is something that is very, very difficult to get through. When you're a chef, cash flow is pretty much, when you're a chef, when you're a restaurateur, when you're a restaurant, cash flow is pretty much everything. When that cash flow stops, you can't pay your bills, you can't pay your employees, you end up getting behind on rent, and there's really no way out of it. The PPP program, even though Congress extended it to 24 weeks as opposed to 8 weeks, and they changed the split 60-40 from payroll and rent, and they made it a little more flexible. They extended the loan portion of that out to 5 years as opposed to 2 years. Those are all really positive, but that's only going to get us halfway across the sort of the chasm. The bridge is only halfway built. We need a stabilization package that's going to actually, ingest a ton of capital into restaurants so they can remain open, and so we have a shot at actually staying open. Right now,
what do restaurants need from Washington?
So the Independent Restaurant Coalition is asking for $120 billion that goes to independent restaurants. Now, keep in mind, independent restaurants employ 11 million people. Indirectly, when you think about the fishermen, farmers, cheesemakers, winemakers, the person who delivers the laundry, it's probably another 6 million people. And so we contributed about $1 trillion into the economy. And so if there's a stimulus package out there that is designed to actually work, meaning that money goes through businesses and that money goes out, the restaurant industry is uniquely positioned to actually do that, because 95 cents to 90 cents of every dollar that we take in goes out. And so we're asking for $120 billion, which is roughly 4 months of income replacement at about 75%. And so that will give us the necessary capital to actually get open, continue to get us through the slow period, and that'll give us a shot at staying open. When we open our doors, we have to remove half our seats. Restaurants at half capacity will not thrive, forget about thrive, it's impossible to operate. It doesn't make sense for restaurants to open their doors only to lose money.
And so we're seeing that now, that restaurants are starting to open up, plexiglass, booths, and some are doing it and some are not. Who's going to survive and who's not? I mean, is it just the bigger ones? I mean, as usual, it's just people that can tell us how you see it kind of playing out for the summer.
No, I think the key to staying open, number one, is we do need more support from the government. There's a bill that Congressman Blumenauer put out there. I believe he has support from other members of Congress as well. Senator Wicker is working on a proposal as well. I believe he's working with Senator Booker on that. And it's exactly what we're talking about, a stabilization package to get us through. But I think, so that's important. Number two, I think the restaurants that are able to make a deal with their landlord, going to a smaller percentage rent, they'll have a shot at actually making it. If we have to pay full rent and trying to open with maybe 30% of the business that we were projecting to do, there is no way to stay open. There's no way that restaurants can make money. And I don't know how long restaurants could actually sustain losses. Now, take into consideration, we're going into the summer. Now, in New York, that's a slow period for restaurants in New York. But when you think of restaurants on the coast, from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon to Virginia Beach to some of those restaurants where they make their entire year in the summer and they rely on tourism, those restaurants are in serious trouble. And so there's a... Yeah.
Isn't there, so both you and José Andrés have restaurants in Las Vegas, is that right? And
that's correct.
Restaurants are more than huge employers. They're kind of a cultural, they're the fabric of societies. Are you worried actually about what the loss of restaurants mean to these communities and whole cities?
Yes, there's the cultural component of restaurants. They become anchors of the community. It's also really important, if these restaurants start closing, we're talking about areas that will become dark where there's no retail on the ground floor. They actually, the crime rates will start going up. You're going to see commercial rents drop. You're going to see stores going dark. Not only restaurants, but all sorts of retail. And so this is, again, another reason why the federal government should respond and actually make sure that we stay open or give us a shot at staying open. Because you're right, we have become culturally important. We're those, anchoring communities. We're the places where people go to celebrate, to have birthdays and anniversaries and, celebrate graduation. And when those restaurants are gone, we're going to lose the fabric of sort of what makes us special. And also, we're not only talking about these big fancy restaurants like mine. We're talking about the mom and pop restaurants. We're talking about the immigrant that is recently naturalized, and they take all their life savings to open up a restaurant where mom and pop and sometimes the children are working in that restaurant. That's the restaurant that we need to save. We need to make sure that's the American dream. And people who've come here because they wanted a better life for themselves, they actually got there, and all of a sudden the rug is getting pulled out from under them for no fault of their own because of COVID. And so this is why we believe the government should respond, because it's saving, again, not just restaurants from a dollar and cents perspective, not only the people that we employ, but culturally what's important, and also saving, again, that American dream. I think those are all really important.
A lot of people, keep saying, when is it going to go back to normal? For restaurants, thousands and thousands of restaurants. I mean, is it really, we have to wait until everyone in America is vaccinated, or we have treatment?
I believe it is. I believe we have to have a vaccine. We need a vaccine. We need treatment. No one is. See, the question isn't when we're going to open our doors. The question is when does the public feel comfortable going to a restaurant? I'm in a little town in Long Island called Mattituck. We have a one street downtown called Love Lane, and there is a restaurant, and they're only open for outdoor seating. There's a handful of people there. Typically, this time of year, that place would be jammed up. And you see that people are uncomfortable. They're wearing masks. The waiters are in masks. I think people are going out because they're cooped up, and I think they're going to start feeling that they shouldn't be out. They shouldn't be interacting. And we're starting to see a lot of places that opened up early, places like Georgia and Florida and Arizona, where we're starting to see a spike now. We're starting to see those numbers go up, and more hospitalizations. And so I think people are going to start seeing that in news, and they're going to be a little more reticent to going out and into the public. And so that's working against us as well.
We see that a lot of people are baking bread at home. They're planting, herbs in their garden. They're thinking more about food. They're, stocking up. In the long term, is there something interesting that you're seeing about trends in American food because of COVID, especially because of what people are eating at home?
Sure. There is a big move to breaking sourdough. I started baking. It's funny. I started baking in the fall, and I'm not much of a baker. I started sort of working on sourdough. I bake now pretty much every other day. But it's amazing that people are actually. You realize that what's getting people through this is food. People they want something that's comfortable. They're starting to bake bread because there's nothing more comforting than a hot loaf of bread slathered with butter, and the idea that you made this for your family. Victory gardens are popping up. I started gardening. I'm a dedicated gardener. In fact, I'm looking at my garden right now. About eight years ago, and people are doing it because they want to take that back. They want to feel some sort of control. And when you can grow your own vegetables and you can bake your own bread, you have some sort of control over this crazy world that we're living in right now. And so that's not surprising to me. I think, though, hopefully, because I know I'm getting tired of cooking, and I cook for a living. I'm getting tired of my own food, and I think my family is starting to too. And so I want to get out there as much as anybody else. But I think it's great that people are actually, taking that control back, but also realizing, the importance of someone who's cooking your food, or someone who's bagging your groceries, or someone who is doing those jobs that people didn't think of so much. They were kind of those, well, that person's doing it, that's great, and now they become so important. And so I think that's a trend that I think we're going to continue seeing. There was a big trend, even though more people care about food, more people are going to restaurants. But there has been a trend over the last 10 years where people are cooking less and less at home. And so hopefully that trend will come back. And I think there's a good reason for that, because the more that people can cook for themselves and cook for their families, the healthier people are going to be. And that's something that I think we need to touch on here. And especially when we talk about hunger. I listened into the last conversation. I am a anti-hunger activist. My wife co-directed a film called A Place at the Table that talked about hunger in this country. But underlying hunger and underlying so many problems that we have in this country, food justice is one of them. And being able to actually take that back, and so you can grow healthy food for your family, or you have access to healthier food for your family, it's really important, because we see the people who are dying because of COVID. It's the people who have comorbidities, and usually obesity is one of those, and malnutrition is another. And so we need to sort of have a deeper conversation about how we can make the country healthier, how we can create incentives. And when I say incentives, meaning that healthy food becomes less expensive. And that's the conversation that we need to have.
We have a question from a viewer here from Sandra Stevenson from Maryland. She's asking you, what do you see the single biggest issue that the hospitality industry faces now? And can the government, what can the government do to help restaurants sustain and recover?
Right. Well, right now, again, we're closed. Restaurants were forced to close. And so we need help. That aside, one of the bigger issues that we're all that we've all have been grappling with for years now is just the racial inequity in restaurants, the lack of capital to minorities.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, racial inequity?
Sure. Minorities have a much more difficult time accessing capital, so they can open restaurants. Fewer people will invest in those restaurants. And I don't think that for a long time journalists have actually focused on amplifying the stories of immigrants, Black-owned businesses, Black-owned restaurants. And so our industry is grappling with that, just like the country is grappling with that right now. So I think that's another big issue. Sandra, I thank you for that question.
And since you are the Top Chef, we were interested in, if you're an amateur gardener, what are three herbs that you would say that people should grow? Because all these people are out there trying, digging dirt for the first time. What do you really need? What are
they're all really easy, but
tips
So keep in mind things like thyme. You plant that once and it comes back. It's perennial, so we'll keep coming back. Basil, every year you're going to have to replant it. Same thing with coriander or cilantro. But I have thyme and sage and basil and tarragon. There's a couple types of basil in there. You don't need a ton of herbs. I think more than often, I think I use thyme more than any other herb. That said, I love pesto as much as the next Italian, and so I make sure there's plenty of basil in the garden so I can make pesto.
If you had a crystal, when do you think will restaurants blossoming? That means not half capacity or shut. When do you think we're going to see restaurants as they were in America at the beginning of the year?
I think we're going to need a vaccine. We need a vaccine. That's when I think people will feel 100% safe. I mean, think about this. Restaurants, we all think in terms of restaurants as the a la carte dining tables and chairs. A lot of restaurants have private dining rooms. In most cases, for instance, one of my restaurants, 60% of our revenue came from private parties. That's not coming back soon at all. I'm talking about large weddings and bar mitzvahs and office events, closing dinners, and things like that. That's not. The restaurant was attached to a conference center. Those conferences aren't coming back anytime soon. We need a vaccine, and that's what's going to help. So, Mary, if I may, because again, I listened to that conversation about hunger, and Senator Coons was so eloquent in talking about some of the issues around hunger, and he did point out that 38 million Americans were on SNAP or food stamps before the pandemic, and Jose was pretty accurate that we double that. I know that in Maryland alone, and this goes back to, I think, God, had almost 2 months ago, they saw a 71% increase in applications. So so what are we aspiring to at the end of this? Are we going to aspire to go back to 38 million people that are on SNAP? And so, no, that's not it. And so, as anti-hunger activists, I lobbied strongly when I was part of the food policy action about making SNAP more robust. But quite frankly, we need to aspire to less SNAP. And when I say that, meaning that fewer people need it, and fewer people need it because they're making more money. And so we actually need to start talking about wages in this country, how to get minimum wage way up, It's, anyone who's working a full-time job in this country should be able to support their family and put food on the table. And that's just not true right now. Keep in mind that 50% of Americans receiving SNAP has a family member working full-time. And so
it's an incredible statistics that we've heard today. But just let me ask you the last short question, because we're past our time. They often say it's a shame to waste a crisis. You should use a crisis to fix something.
Sure.
So one thing, Tom, in food, what would you fix? What, as the country gets through this, what do you hope on the other side that we're in a better place on regarding food?
Well, number one, the conversation that you had earlier about the FEED Act. One issue with the FEED Act is the Stafford Act. The Stafford Act actually gives jurisdiction over emergency situations to states and local governments, and that's fine because most disasters are localized. It doesn't work when you have a national pandemic, and so the Stafford Act, I think, needs to be repealed or at least sort of rejiggered, because it doesn't work in a pandemic. We need to have this plan in place going forward. All the work that Jose is doing right now, which is amazing work, is going to be for naught if we don't actually get our arms around this and have a government that thinks long term about the solutions to some of these problems, not short term. We can't wait for the pandemic to hit. We can't wait for the hurricane to hit to say, oh, we have to do something. We have to have a plan that very, very quickly you can put in place so we don't see these lines. And what I'm hoping, and this is what I'm hoping, again, that the people who never thought in their life that they would be in a 2-hour line or even a 10-minute line waiting for a food bank to give them food, people who had jobs 2 months ago, 3 months ago, who never thought about it. I hope now that they have more empathy for the person who actually needs help. We have to get away from this, someone just made bad decisions and they shouldn't have had children and they should take their own responsibility. And I hope now that after this pandemic, we're going to have a more empathetic country who can actually look at some of these problems that we have and find solutions as opposed to just blaming people. A lot of people right now are hurting for no fault of their own, and a lot of people who are born into poverty are hurting because of no fault of their own. It's just a bad luck of the draw. And I think we need to have a more empathetic country. When it comes to food, we need to make healthier food more affordable. If we could do that, we'll have a healthier nation.
Well, thank you, Tom Colicchio. It's been wonderful talking to you. What a program, what an important discussion. The lines that we're seeing at food banks are disturbing, and the numbers are incredible for hungry Americans. I'm delighted that we had Senator Coons, Chef Jose Andrés, and of course, Tom Colicchio today to talk about hunger in America
Mary,
and what we can do. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank you and the Washington Post for shining a light on this issue. Thank you very much.
And I'm grateful to all the viewers that we have, and please go to WashingtonPostLive.com. We have an incredible lineup coming up most days. We have Black Lives Matters activists. We have CEOs talking about the economic crisis in America. We have all kinds of people. If you go to WashingtonPostLive.com, you'll see the whole schedule. And I'm grateful for those who tuned in today. Thank you. I'm Mary Jordan from the Washington Post.